Don't believe anything you hear, and only half of what you see. A phrase we often dismiss as paranoia, but perhaps, just perhaps, it's not cynicism. It's survival. Because what if reality itself, what we're told is normal, stable, trustworthy, is not just distorted, but engineered? Let me take you somewhere. Not a place, exactly, but a pattern. A current beneath the surface. A system so subtle, so slow-moving, that you don't see it until you're drowning in it. We've been introduced to this term, the new normal. It sounds benign, predictable, necessary even. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's not new at all, but something ancient, something rehearsed? See, the most effective propaganda doesn't feel like propaganda. It doesn't come with horns or flags. It whispers. It nudges. It normalizes. You begin adjusting your behavior without knowing why. You join the group, not because it's right, but because standing alone feels unsafe. And that's where this story begins. Let's rewind the tape. Back to the Cold War. Back to Fort Detrick, Maryland, 1943. This is where Frank Olson worked. Not a name you know, but one that matters. He was a U.S. Army bacteriologist stationed inside the walls of the nation's top-secret bioweapons lab. And what he saw there would fracture him. Olson wasn't just a passive observer. He was deeply embedded. He worked alongside Nazi scientists, imported through Operation Paperclip men, with blood on their hands, now repurposed for American defense. He helped develop aerosolized anthrax. He participated in operations with names like harness and sea spray sterile names, designed to conceal grotesque realities. Operation Sea Spray. That one's particularly chilling. In 1950, the U.S. Navy sprayed San Francisco with bacteria Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigi to test how vulnerable a city might be to biological attack. The result? 800,000 residents were exposed. At least 10 fell severely ill. 1 man died. No one was told. This wasn't an isolated case. Between 1949 and 1969, similar open-air tests occurred 239 times. Think about that, nearly 2 decades of experimenting on an unwitting public. And Frank Olson saw it all. But what changed him, what truly shattered him, wasn't just the science. It was the silence that followed it. The justifications. The erasure. He witnessed live interrogations at CIA black sites in Europe. Interrogations where experimental drugs, hypnosis, and torture were used until people died. Expendables, they were called, sometimes Soviet agents, sometimes former Nazis. When Olson returned from Europe in 1953, he was a different man. Paranoid, disillusioned, haunted. And 9 days later, he was dead. He had been covertly dosed with LSD by Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the CIA Cultra program, without his consent at a government retreat. Days later, Olson fell or was pushed from a hotel window in New York. The official story changed over time. First suicide, then misadventure, then decades later an apology. But apologies don't close wounds, they only confirm they were real. In 1994, a second autopsy was performed. Professor James Starrs found head trauma blunt force injuries inconsistent with a fall. His conclusion? Strong evidence of homicide. He called it rankly and starkly suggestive. And when you read the CIA's own assassination manual, yes, they had one, it gets darker. It describes a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface as the ideal accidental death. A cover story. So why was Frank Olson killed? Because he knew too much. According to scholar Michael Ignatieff, Olson was a liability. He had knowledge about U.S. biological warfare in Korea, about CIA torture operations, about the disposal of inconvenient assets. He was breaking down. He was going to talk. So they silenced him. This is not conspiracy. This is documented. This is history. And it's not over. Because today we're being asked to accept another version of the new normal. One dressed in digital clothing. One that tells you, stay calm, obey, trust the system. We'll take it from here. Since 9/11, we've been trained to comply. Psychologically conditioned to keep our heads down. To defer. The more noise, the less clarity. And that noise? It's deafening now. Endless information. Pre-selected choices. Social penalties for asking the wrong questions. You're not encouraged to think. You're encouraged to absorb. To conform. Conformity is praised. Individuality is punished. We are told, conformity is your survival. Individuality? That's everyone's extinction. But let's stretch this further. Environmental chaos is now routine. Historic floods, Arctic heat waves, Category 5 typhoons. In February, climate scientists warn us, this isn't just strange. It's unprecedented. It cannot be explained without acknowledging human interference. And yet we're taught to absorb it. Shrug. Move on. Normal now. Then there's the geopolitical stage. China and the U.S. hurtling toward confrontation. A new Cold War? Or something worse? Taiwan becomes a fault line. Cyber warfare, cognitive warfare, economic decoupling. While the pandemic strains every seam, the world's superpowers sharpen their knives behind closed doors. And amid all this, we're told, don't worry, technology will save us. Automation will provide. Just trust. Don't think. Don't resist. But here's the catch. If you don't conform, surveillance will find you. If you speak too loudly, the system will label you. If you question the narrative, you become the threat. Suddenly, conspiracy theorists aren't eccentric, they're dangerous. Thought itself becomes subversion. And so the new normal marches on. But let me ask you something. Are we really all in this together? Or are we being gently, quietly steered? Because the truth is, we are not just participants in this story. We are the targets of it. Frank Olson was one man, but his story is a mirror, a reflection of what happens when truth becomes inconvenient, when silence is weaponized, when normalization is more dangerous than the event itself. If you've listened this far, if you've felt that flicker of doubt, of unease, of something not quite right, good. Because that flicker? That's your mind still working, still asking, still resisting. So ask yourself, what is your new normal? And who decided it for you?